it's not just politics and kind of attitudes that, judges sort of just follow their preferences. Ideas and approaches to policy and the ideas underlying them and their consequences are influential on judges.
Just for you as a professor, it's like you have to know you have great influence over the people you teach.
It's not just about law. It's not just about politics. Ideas matter. Ideas have consequences.
No one wants AI judging whether they're getting thrown in jail or not.
We find that very positive responses to the AI. The judges, they keep using it. They recommend it. We see some evidence of improving the quality, like the writing clarity and quality of their opinions.
Welcome to the Law and Economics podcast. Today, we're talking with Elliott Ash about his article, Ideas Have Consequences: The Impact of Law and Economics on American Justice. This article was written by Elliott and his co-authors Daniel Chen and Suresh Naidu. In this episode, we'll explore the influence of the Manne Economics Institute's training program for federal judges, a program that introduced generations of judges to economic reasoning and free market legal theory. Mr. Ash is an accomplished economist currently teaching at ETH Zurich, an adjunct professor at NYU Law School, visiting professor at Columbia University Law School, and scientific lead at the Swiss AI Institute. He earned his PhD in economics and JD at Columbia University, bachelor's degree at University of Texas at Austin, along with an LLM in international criminal law from the University of Amsterdam. Without further ado, let's get into it. How you doing, Elliott?
Doing very well. Thank you very much, Laura. Great to be here. Looking forward to talking about the article.
Yeah, so let's first talk a little bit about your background. So what got you into this field of law and economics?
Sure. So I did a little bit of work in economics, study of economics at the University of Texas, but then went on to law school. And for you and many others, learning about all of the black letter law and all the different influences in 1L, 2L year. Maybe some of you had a similar experience to me of seeing that law only made sense in light of economics. And that was my experience, is that how the law worked, how people responded to it, understanding the thought processes of judges, how contracts, how torts should be designed. Economics was this really useful lens for understanding legal reasoning and legal institutions. And I started learning this myself by reading books by Richard Posner, other articles of that ilk. And so immediately had my own interest in law and economics.
That's great.
That turned into research that I did during law school, and then subsequently in a PhD in economics. And my research really centered around economics of legal institutions, economics of judicial behavior, and starting off by looking at, what are the institutions in state Supreme Courts and how they led to better or worse judging among state courts. So, for example, some of my earlier work was looking at in the state court systems when you introduced an intermediate appellate court. So, it's still this way in many states, but it used to be where all states had just the trial courts, and then they went straight to the state Supreme Court. And that ends up being a lot of work for small state Supreme Courts. And you can really help deliver more thoughtful judicial opinions that were cited more often and had more influence on the law after introducing an intermediate appellate court. So the high courts could rely on the intermediate appellate courts for filtering some of that out. I did some other work on comparing state Supreme Courts where the judges were elected versus appointed. In the state, there's kind of these three systems where you have partisan elections, kind of like politicians, and then you have nonpartisan elections. So they take the partisanship out of it. And then they have these merit appointment systems. And my research suggests that when you compare two judges on the same court at the same time that were selected under the different systems, the less politicized processes select better judges who write more thoughtful opinions, and then those are more impactful on the law and on other states. And then third and finally, I have a paper looking at mandatory retirement among state Supreme Court judges. This is relevant today when we have this aging judiciary and, judges becoming sick on the court or even dying while they're on the court or shortly after. Many states have introduced mandatory retirement age around age 70 usually. So it's like an age-based term limit for judges. And my research shows that when you introduce mandatory retirement, those courts actually function better. They deliver more rulings. They write longer, more thoughtful opinions, and those are more impactful on the law, suggesting that having this age-based cap is actually good for judicial institutions. So that's kind of like
Yeah.
how I sort of got into what you call kind of empirical research, statistical research, econometrics research about judges. And I mentioned I was working on judicial elections, but the something that's always been interesting to me is the influence of politics on
Mm.
on judging.
Right.
And I think that, as you mentioned earlier, there's kind of like these two classic perspectives where there's one that's called like you know legalism or black letter law approach or legal formalism, where judges are kind of like these arbiters and they take the law from on high, like natural law, or they just interpret the Constitution, and there's some kind of like truth underlying the sort of different legal issues,
Right.
and they just have to interpret that for us. So
Right.
that's one side, and then there's the other side, which is kind of like mostly associated with political science, where sometimes it's called the attitudinal model. So like so saying that judges have political attitudes, and that kind of that actually is what determines their decisions. And okay, well, this judge is a Republican, this judge is a liberal Democrat, and they just follow their political views, and there's no role for law at all. But if you just kind of think about that for a second, I mean, it seems like it can't be either of those on its own, right? Because even on the Supreme Court, like the U.S. Supreme Court, where it's a pretty politicized court,
Mm-hmm.
the judges, they agree a lot. So like, often I think it's like a majority of the time, the judges from the different sort of like, ends of the political spectrum, they agree with each other, but they also disagree a lot as well.
Hmm.
So you can't really say it's one or the other of these kind of extremes. And
Right.
that kind of invites this new question. Okay, well, what's the relative importance of politics or law, or are there additional influences?
Right. It seems like you've done a lot of thinking about the judiciary at a systems level. Like you would be the perfect person to hire. We got a blank canvas, a new society. How do we think about the judiciary? Because you've examined it from many different lenses. What is this impact? And we have the natural experiment of various states having different state rules.
Yeah.
But then, at the federal level, you've done a lot of research on that too. What do you think about populism as an additional influence? That was my con law professor's take on it, that it's neither political ideology nor the law, which, by the way, footnote, that was like the biggest eye opener going to one of these elite law schools was, wow, the law doesn't matter sometimes. So, okay, but it's not, the law, it's not political ideology. What if it's like populism and really judges don't move and they can't make decisions until there's a critical, view of the public, not necessarily in line with a particular ideologically driven, but more
Yeah.
like, we think this is the right thing. We can't do it now. We got to wait because we're concerned about our court as an institution. What about that?
Yeah.
I know we're
Yeah.
sidetracking a little bit,
Yeah, no,
but
that's great. I think that's another really important influence on judges. And so, we can think of some, kind of important examples of this. That one of the classic examples is, around the New Deal times in the 1940s, the 1930s and 40s, the Supreme Court was striking down a lot of more liberalizing, redistributive legislation that would have introduced a lot more market interventions from federal lawmaking that hadn't really been allowed before. But there was a really big popular push for that.
Mhm.
There's this kind of this force of populism supporting these New Deal initiatives. This eventually builds up with the threats to pack the court, and then the judges have to respond to that. And then more
Right,
recently, the Chief Justice John Roberts, I think he's pretty clear about this, that he really cares about the legitimacy
right,
of the court as an institution. And if people don't approve of it, then the court has power because people believe it does. And so
right.
because it kind of has this kind of fragile position, you really need to bring people on board. And I think that this is maybe getting ahead, but I think that new technologies that allow summarization or explanation or better understanding of the courts is a really important development that we're having right
Mhm.
now. This is going to be one of the side effects of AI, is that people can really understand what the court is doing.
Right.
And at the moment, like like let's say before a few years ago, when you have like a Chat GPT and large language models, to understand what the court was doing, that was pretty hard, right?
Right.
Like you most of the opinions, there's no way you can understand them if you're like not, if you don't have legal training, and even if you do have legal training, most of those opinions are pretty hard to read. Like,
Right.
and you have to kind of understand that those areas of law to really get it. And the best you could do is like read something that the New York Times reporter or Wall Street Journal like Supreme Court reporter would explain it to you. And those guys they're kind of part of the court. Like they've worked there for many years. Like they're kind of selective in what they summarize or what they report on, and
Right.
they have their own views and perspective. Oh, I like this judge. I don't like that judge. And you can't just have like an unmediated interpretation or view on what the judges are doing. And so I think the fact that AI is actually can deliver very good, simple summaries of judicial opinions, I think is an important vehicle for kind of more popular influence on the court.
Do you think we'll get into the article after this last question, but do you think that's going to enhance the legitimacy of the judiciary or decrease it? Because as we all know from law school, we get surprised. We're like, wait, the case before it just said this. How did they come to this? And then there's like some random technicality. It's like, why did they decide that? I mean, is it gonna like show that the emperor is really wearing new clothes, or is it
Yeah.
is it gonna help promote trust? And I mean, I just think we're at a point in democracy, and I shouldn't interject my opinions here, but we're just at a point where these things really do matter. And it matters how institutions are perceived and that they're perceived as doing the right thing and being supporting our whole society, you
I
know?
totally agree. I think
Yeah.
there's a very interesting trade-off there. That you know, judges wear robes, literally, like like the emperor's robes, and so and they have formality, and they have these kind of institutional, like kind of like this mystique that I think I wonder if we need it now still. I have mixed views about that, but I think it's definitely the case that there's a real function of that, which is it allows judges and lawyers and experts to have this kind of elite conversation, discussing kind of ideas in sort of a depoliticized way that most people don't understand. That maybe there's like a benefit to that.
Hmm.
Another example is like central banks. They load up a lot of their discussions with jargon. Some of that is actually like useful jargon, right? Because they need to talk about things in a technocratic way about interest rates and inflation and different economic factors. But there's another function where many politicians or like many voters who, might be short-sighted or have like, might not have full understanding of the issues, they could be less engaged about it because of this kind of technocratic language. And so the fact that, AI could come in and really reveal everything, that could also have downsides. And it will be interesting to see that. I will say though, like across the world in general, like the move among courts, it has been towards greater transparency. So
Hmm.
like in Canada, they publish simple summaries of all their opinions on
Hmm.
their website, which I think that's a nice initiative. But if what the court is doing is unpopular, then that could lead to some backlash and some delegitimization of the institution.
Right. Interesting. All right, now let's get into the article. So, this program, the Manne program, which is what you were studying, it occurred from the late 70s to late 90s, and it was a period in history that many of us millennials were young kids. We didn't really experience the adult world back then.
That's part of this era of Ronald Reagan, Reaganomics,
Right, right,
totally sort of like kind of Ayn Rand sort of style, right? Like
right.
this sort of like greed is good, business is good, like the titans of industry should really kind of start leading things. Like I think that was really in the zeitgeist then.
And it
That
was
must
very, very black and white back then, it
Yeah.
seems. It was like this was new. This was a new way of thinking. Trickle down economics, Reaganomics, greed is good. Like we have to get ourselves back in that mindset, right? I mean, nowadays we have a little more we have more nuance, even if you are, you fall into that camp. There's a little more nuance there, right? But back in the day, there were the shoulder pads, there was the neon, it was rah-rah economics and law.
Yeah, I think this comes in cycles, right? Where it's like, there's like the Gilded Age and the Rockefellers and the Carnegies in the early 1900s. Then, this I think this kind of like, was kind of like went a little bit underground culturally for a while. It comes
Hmm.
back in more in the 80s, Maybe it kind of died down a little bit in the 90s, but we still see echoes of this and resonances of this with, like a lot of the, the tax cuts in the 2000s, also, more recent tax cuts in the last years. There's also like a culture around, Silicon Valley and founders that sort of has like, oh, these guys who have these billion-dollar companies, well, they must be doing something right,
Right.
and we should, turn over our law, our policy to them. And some of that is very kind of in your face and upfront, but a lot of it is more behind the scenes. You go back to the 80s, that was also the same time that, as we're going to talk about in a second, the Law and Economics the Law and Economics Center was getting going. The Manne program, so this Economic Institute for Federal Judges, but also the Federalist Society,
Right.
were kind of like these behind the scenes influences on policy, business policy, done through influencing the judiciary rather than influencing Congress. And so, I think what many people have been familiar with already is understanding like the influence of lobbying organizations, campaign donations,
Right.
and the revolving door in both the Congress, but also in the federal agencies. And, when you have people from some of the big financial institutions then becoming, the regulators, like, or the
Right.
Secretary of Treasury, then there really is kind of like this pretty clear conflict. But the way that it's done in the judiciary is much less direct and kind of more obscured. There are other kind of judge training programs. Actually, NYU has one that they have some trainings for new judges, but that's more about kind of like, just the practice of judging, and it doesn't really have like, it's not really about the ideological or policy content of law. But I think in terms of something like this, where it really has this kind of training aspect, where it's like, this is how you should think about legal issues, I think it must be the most influential program that there's ever been in the U.S. or
Right.
globally. I'm not sure. But that being said, the Law and Economics Center, it actually it continues to this day, not in the same format, so that you don't have these 2 or 3 week long intensive programs, but you have like a 1 week one or a few days, and you have judges not just in the U.S. but also globally doing these economics trainings.
Right.
And so I think the results that we have in this paper are still, pretty relevant. And even though I think that, a lot of stars aligned for this really impactful program to come in and I think deliver for the donors. And we can talk about that, like you actually see after the judges attending the program, they use more economics reasoning in their
Right.
opinions. So it kind of like the ideas got in there.
Yeah.
And then secondly, they have a more kind of conservative, pro-business, kind of pro-market orientation in their decisions after attending as well. One of the kind of clear ways that you can see this is in labor regulation cases, like labor law, kind of labor unions, or in environmental regulations.
Mm-hmm.
The judges are voting in a more conservative direction, kind of like, voting against labor rights, voting against environmental regulation. And you can think of that as like, well, if you're Monsanto or DuPont or,
Right.
or like a car company or something, that could really hit your bottom line if you have
Sure.
half of the judges in the judiciary voting your way on those types of issues.
Sure. I mean, naive person part of me wants to think this is actually kind of cool. I fell in love with law and economics like you early in my youth. Like I love the idea that contracts and laws could structure incentives. I love the idea in contract law of, the efficient breach or how to set up a contract in a way that motivates someone to take an act or not take an act. And,
Yeah.
in torts, thinking about how marginal cost, marginal benefit, and how we should think about whether something was reasonable in that light, and then criminal law, like the probability of getting caught in something multiplied by the potential outcome of that getting caught, like the penalty would be your marginal cost of taking an action, of taking an action compared to,
Yeah.
so it just provided a nice framework, right? It just provided a way of thinking that was very, like, you could break down kind of the human sense that you had into math and see it on a blackboard, and it just
Mhm.
felt like grounding. But the real world is not that way. And as I studied under other teachers, I layered on top of that basic training kind of more human sciences, social sciences. And I think we talked a little bit more earlier about how the field of law and economics, or economics generally, it has expanded since this time. But
Yeah.
I'm going back to your article, though, just to cut to the chase on the results, because we touched on it a little bit. I want to make sure we get to the point. Can you summarize the core findings in your paper and explain a little bit about what that Y variable was, like what you were looking
Yeah.
for and what your findings were?
Yeah. So to summarize in a few sentences, and I want to come back to the what you were saying earlier about economics as adding clarity to law, but also how newer sort of generations of economics have really kind of changed things, and
Yeah,
that's another reason why this specific program, I think, wouldn't happen in the same form today.
right.
But going back to the '80s. 1976 up until 1998, when this program was running, once a year, sometimes twice a year, 20 judges are attending this program. And, these are district judges and circuit court judges. And all of their work product is public, right? So we can actually see their decisions. We can see the cases that they make, and we can see the opinions that they write. And so this is, this is very nice for statistical analysis, empirical analysis. We built the data set of all these judges' decisions,
Right.
and we lined those up with the timing of when they attended this course. And so this is a really standard research design in economics, of just like differences and differences, where you compare judges who attended this program to the judges that didn't attend or on the same court at the same time, or judges that are going to attend later. We have good reason to believe that this is a nice natural experiment, because the judges, it was a first come, first serve application process where, especially in the earlier years of this program, it was very popular. Many judges were signing up. They only took like the first 20 on the list, and the others had to wait until the next year. And so the timing, at least on a short run basis, is it's kind of random. Like whether
Mm.
you go in one year and whether you go in the other year. And so you compare the judges that went in 1978 to those that went in 1982. In those 4 years, what's the difference in their decisions? And some of the outcomes that we zoom in on are, first, just to kind of this is almost like a to kind of check the design, is, do the judges actually talk about economics after going into the program? And we have a text as data method applied to their judicial opinions to see if they use language related to economics reasoning. And we do see that. If you're the judge that goes in 1978 and the other one goes in 1982, this guy starts talking about economics language earlier than the other guy. Another reason that this program, I think, was at an interesting time is that, relative to today, economics related reasoning and language is actually lower than it is today. So actually a lot of judges have been exposed to economics now, I think, like in
Hmm.
law school, or just like other, learning from their peers, or other kind of like law and economics I think has kind of diffused through the judiciary. And actually, me being a professor in Zurich and kind of seeing how law is done in Europe, you can actually really see that like economics is just much more influential in the US
Hmm.
law than it is in Europe, not just among judges, but among lawyers generally. That, for me, that was very interesting what you said earlier about how, I know you work on deals, and the
Right.
fact that, you actually are thinking about economics, and kind of this idea of efficient breach, or the idea that there's kind of like different like minimum cost avoiders, or sort of like there's different asymmetric information in the contracts, and you should kind of structure them around
Totally.
that.
Yeah.
That's pretty sophisticated,
Oh,
from an economics perspective, and you would never hear that in Europe. So
yeah.
it's much rarer. And my belief is that, I think that makes contracts, better designed, and it's really helpful for preventing like conflict, or like preventing like lowering risks in the future. And so this is like another example where okay, well, you have judges learn economics and they use economics reasoning in their opinions. Me as an economist, and then you also liking economics, you're like, oh, that's probably a good thing, right? So like, they can think more clearly.
Right.
And we actually don't rule that out necessarily. So like if you ask the judges, like you can see this in their letters to the organizers, they perceived themselves as being better judges after. This could be true, right? So I mean, it's
Sure.
hard for us to measure that, right? One thing we tried looking at is, at their citations to their opinions after they attended, and that didn't go up. So we didn't see like their opinions kind of becoming more influential. One thing we did find is that the district court judges who attended, they were more likely to be promoted to circuit judge. And so, maybe that's a sign that the program helped them. But it also could be that it's a political thing, right? So like, after they were, because they actually, they're only more likely to be promoted by Republican presidents.
Right.
So we can't rule that out. But what we can say is their decisions in economics related cases, so like labor regulation, environmental regulation, those moved in a more conservative direction. It could be that those were the right calls, right? That's hard for us to say. It could be that the status quo was kind of too liberal, let's say, or
Right.
was like kind of too was too intrusive in the market. It's hard for us to say one way or the other. But kind of stepping forward a second, the other set of outcomes that we look at are on criminal law um,
Right.
uh, decisions in the district courts. We have nice data on over 1 million criminal sentencing decisions in the district courts. We look conditional on guilt. So these are, of course, it's mostly plea bargains, right? So,
Right.
conditional after being convicted. Judges have a lot of have a lot of discretion about the sentencing. This is something that you mentioned earlier. Is like it's one of the classic ideas in law and economics. Is if you want to deter crime, then you kind of have two knobs for that. One is increased detection probability, so you make it more likely that crime is detected, and so you'll get punished, or
Right.
you make the punishments more intense. And so judges, they're in their courts, they are not controlling what the police do, so they cannot change detection probability,
Right.
but they have a direct knob on increasing the severity of punishment. And so these Manne Program classes in law and economics, as a discussion at the time, this idea of kind of increasing criminal penalties to deter crime was like this was one of the big parts of the discourse. And
Right.
so
But isn't it missing something though? I mean, isn't it missing like judges are not policymakers? Like, why do they get to decide that it's a black and white thing? Like crime must be deterred and it's their duty. I mean, marijuana, is an example in certain communities. Like, why would it always be necessary? I mean, this just produces like extreme outcomes, doesn't it? Like if they
yeah, I and we and my team, we were a little surprised to see that because
right.
it's a little bit of a simplistic interpretation
Right. Even
of law
economics.
and
I
economics.
mean, even
Yeah.
economics, you would still have to you would have to zoom out a little bit broader to take a proper law and economics view of a particular criminal legal regime, right? Like, yes, the punishment probability and all that, but you'd have to take, as a society, what is the cost to incarcerating people? And what is the cost to future generations who grew up without their fathers? What is the cost to our societies? Like, it just is too small of a view, even applying the law and economics mindset, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is like part of this sort of 1980s
Right.
early law and economics movement that was a little bit simplistic. It was like kind of econ 101.
Right. Like
It's
we
like
can do math. We can multiply.
right, yeah, right. And it's like, like a little bit of economics, maybe it's worse than no economics in some way. This is like maybe one of the downsides or sort of limitations of this short program that they did. And I think like, potentially one of like the potentially costly downsides. And I think another example of like, if you did this today, since the 80s, there's been a lot more follow-up work on, as you already pointed out, kind of the costs of incarceration, but also just
Right.
like empirically, there's been a lot of statistical studies showing that deterrence theory is correct in the sense that if you have harsher penalties and higher detection probability, that does reduce crime, but actually detection probability is much more important.
Interesting. Interesting. Right. And that's where AI could possibly come in too, right? I know you have a whole passion about that. Yeah, it's just it's fascinating.
And so,
Like,
just to kind of like step back a bit and kind of go back to what we were talking
yeah,
about at the beginning, is I think one of the implications of this research is that it's adding some evidence that it's not just this sort of legal formalism where, judges are applying black letter law. It's not just politics and kind of attitudes that, judges sort of just follow their preferences. Ideas and approaches to policy and the ideas underlying them and their consequences are influential on judges. Judges are, can be moved and influenced by the ideas that are flowing within the system. And
Sure.
I think that economics is like, because you saw in those agendas, the syllabi that we were looking at earlier, in addition to these kind of like sort of economic policy discussions, there were like probability and econometrics and statistics, and so they were learning some useful tools, but also that probably built up its credibility as well. And
Right.
so you can kind of see how those elements, which do have some truth and some value to them, they also made it more persuasive.
Right. Yeah, I think it reminds me that we kind of all have blind spots, and perhaps the judges of the day didn't were not trained in economics and recognized their blind spots and swung very far in the other way when they kind of realized it. And for me, like in law school, kind of seeing some of my blind spots growing up in a certain way and then being educated in other ways. And it just, for you as a professor, it's like you have to know you have great influence over the people you teach, right? Because you get them and you get to train them and for a whole semester on a way of thinking or an idea, mold them. And not that there would be a motivation behind that, but
Yeah.
it's just really the power of science and learning and curiosity and how we as humanity, we're always learning, right? There's always new fields and new insights we can gain from academic research or from commerce that kind of shed light on how we're thinking about things and maybe show where we may be missing things.
Yeah. And
So,
I think there's a responsibility to be considered there. And also, law schools should think about this and like,
right.
how they have 3 years of people who have, very valuable skills and valuable time. What should we teach people then? And I think economics is a very good piece of the curriculum in law schools, but this research shows that how that's done matters.
Yeah, what I appreciate about economics, just like law, it's a way of thinking. It's not, it can be applied in a good way and bad ways for good ends, for bad ends, for liberal, conservative. It's just a way of thinking, and I think there are other ways of thinking too in other fields that are
Yeah,
helpful.
for sure.
All right. Well, do you want to get in a little bit on some of the other things you're working on outside of this scholarly research?
Sure. So, as you kindly previewed earlier, my research on judges has more recently moved into something that is on all of our minds on artificial intelligence and different technologies like this. There's been a discussion, let's say for 10, 15 years on recidivism risk prediction, for example, like, detect trying to guess from different characteristics whether defendants will commit more crimes and then using that as an input to like decisions about probation or parole or bail. And that discussion has really, become even more broadened when now that we have these kind of general purpose AI technologies like large language models that can really help judges in many aspects of their work. Some of my own research has kind of developed some of these tools. And we did a large scale field experiment in Pakistan where we developed we developed a large language model chatbot that's specialized for judges that has access to all the Pakistani case law.
Hmm.
And we rolled this out along with the Federal Judicial Academy, Pakistan. And we ended up delivering this AI tool along with a training program
Hmm.
to almost half of the judges in Pakistan. So it's kind of like it was kind of a nationwide rollout, really,
Wow.
across all the courts. About half the judges were in the course. We did it over about a year, over a set of 5 courses. So me and my team at ETH designed the system, and then I taught this course. So
Hmm.
we did it on Zoom, kind of like this, where I had 300 Pakistan judges in a webinar with me. I taught them about AI, a little bit of how it worked, about what could be done with it in terms of helping them write, helping them summarize, doing legal research, improving the clarity of their writing, asking for critiques and feedback. And also, I was giving them lots of warnings about the potential downsides of AI,
Right.
that there's risks of bias, there's risks of hallucination. I did a lot of teaching about how to try to avoid that and kind of like mitigate that. Also, that the AI system is designed in California, which is pretty different from the values of Pakistan. And if you go on ChatGPT and you ask it, okay, well, like how much of an inheritance should a son and a daughter get? It's
Right.
going to say 50-50, but the official rule in Pakistan is that sons should get double,
Right.
daughters. And so
Mm.
the Pakistani judges have to learn to balance that. But they were very open and very kind of like open, like and also they were they needed this technology because they're so overworked.
Right.
Where some of them have like 500 cases they're working on at once, like
Right.
extreme things like this. They work in English, which is not their native language, and that's kind of a
Mhm.
legacy of the British colonial system. And so for them, like kind of writing in English is pretty costly, but a large language model really helps with that. And we find that very positive responses to the AI. The judges, they keep using it. They recommend it. We see some evidence of improving the quality, like the writing clarity and
Right.
quality of their opinions, and also some evidence that they can reduce their case backlogs with access to the AI. And so this is some of the kind of the first evidence that, at least in these kind of resource constrained
Right.
contexts, then that having an AI kind of supporting the legal process is helpful. But if you think about kind of in the case of like the U.S. or like Europe, where the judges, they say they're overworked, but relatively speaking, the judges in the U.S. have most of them have a pretty good setup. They have clerks, they have secretaries, they already have
Right.
technology helping them. In that case, I think that, sort of a general interest chat bot like a chat GPT, it might have limited use
Mm.
because they already can handle their workload, and they already have enough time for writing and research, things like this. But there's another kind of side of the coin of technologies, which is like not document generation, but actually
Mm.
document verification. I mentioned this to you that I have this Law 360 article from a few weeks ago where I built a court filing verifier system that can scan through court filings and judicial opinions and do kind of a careful read,
Mm.
looking for errors and mistakes, looking for verifiable errors. So some of these are pretty mundane, like a misspelling or a missed comma.
Right.
Others are more like, the section numbers don't match up. So like, oh, you said section 2, but you meant section 3. Others are like, oh, you swapped out the names of the plaintiff and the defendant. But others are more serious, like
Right.
citing law, like the wrong statute code that you didn't mean, or citing a case that didn't say what you implied, or even, accidentally citing a case that isn't even out there.
Right.
And it
Which
turns out that
many of
this
the big firms are getting slapped
yeah.
on the wrist for
Yeah,
that one
yeah.
recently.
So yeah, you probably saw the news about Sullivan and Cromwell
Of course.
yesterday. This kind of what they say hallucinated or fabricated citations is this increasingly increasingly urgent in the age of
Right.
AI, and that comes from generating with AI. But verifying with AI is different, but it turns out that errors like these that I'm talking about are actually very frequent.
Right.
Almost all cases have at least a minor error.
I think this is fabulous because that's mainly how I use AI in my practice. I use it as a quality enhancer, not as any sort of substitute for what I do. So, unfortunately, at this point, it's not saving me time, but it does make me better. So I
Yeah, and,
responsibly use
and
it to check my
that's great.
yeah,
And I think that this kind of having this verification in your workflow,
right,
you think ahead about it, right? Because you're like, okay,
right,
well now I'm gonna have to check this later, so I'm gonna take it. It kind of helps you with the earlier stages of your
right,
workflow because it's gonna have to be verified, and that you do it correctly. And so the system that I built for this kind of this document verifier error detection across the courts, this is also available as a tool for lawyers. It's called Trace Law, and it's available at trace.law. Maybe we put it in the notes, but you can
definitely.
also you can also learn about it in my Law 360 article.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, anything we can do to ensure against embarrassment as lawyers is a positive. Keep us out of the headlines, Elliot, please.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, just quickly going back to the Pakistani judges thing, I had a question. First of all, I think it sounds like the positives of this are that it improves access to justice for the mounting caseloads that these courts can't get to and improves the quality of the writing. It in a way it could be viewed as controversial because no one wants AI judging whether they're getting thrown in jail or not. And training program just like the one you studied, this is like it's not Manny 2.0, it's Ash training program over in Pakistan. So,
Right.
is it, but you don't have a particular agenda and you're not funded by anyone in this program, right? Like
Yeah.
no private.
Yeah, I think that those are interesting, kind of important differences. This program was funded by ETH Zurich and by the Swiss
Right.
National Science Foundation, and didn't have any private funders. I do think that there are risks like this that should be kept in mind, and that's
Yeah.
and I think that the judiciary should not, at least that there should definitely be some safeguards for
Yeah.
companies doing trainings or influencing the judiciary. I mean, there must be an existing discussion about this because judges are using like Lexis or Westlaw,
Right.
using different companies, and those companies that are kind of gatekeepers to the law, they have that's an important function, like kind of a public function.
Right.
There's something that I haven't seen much discussion about this. This could be that they actually are pretty neutral, which I hope that's what it is.
Mhm.
Lexis and Westlaw, that they kind of they have an agenda in the extent that they
Sure.
want to keep they want to keep law locked up, for example. So
Sure. And you can't access, much of the case law and the keynotes and all this. But, this has been legal research and analysis of like American jurisprudence. I mean, secondary source materials have been around. It's just now it's online. But I think, like you said, there has to be appropriate checks. And I wonder, not just in judicial reasoning, if there's a way we as a society can come up with like maintaining and training people to use their common sense when using AI, like that human element, like have we lost it, right? Where are we still as a species like strong enough to look at something that looks very rational and
right,
reasonable
yeah,
on paper, has all the citations on its face and say
yeah.
that something doesn't smell right with this? Do we still have that? And how do we preserve that? Right? That is
Yeah.
what I want. That's what I
That's
want
the
to keep.
question. With the Pakistan judges, this was a big part of the training, or at least I tried to do this in the
Right.
training, that the AI is not the judge. You're the
Right.
judge. The AI is in a support role for you. You decide how to leverage this
Right.
technology to basically help yourself help you kind of deliver opinions that are more well reasoned or clearer or at least faster, and to help you find better case law to support your position. But also, there's a risk to that where, okay, well, whatever citations the AI gives, I'm going to rely on those rather than do my own due diligence.
Right.
Or if the AI suggests, oh, I should make this ruling, then I just follow it. I think that we have to be intentional about this, because if you ask the AI, how should I decide this case? It gives you an answer. That is a task that's more about humans than about technology. We have to have teaching and training and kind of building people up, and say human judges have to maintain their agency and
For sure.
maintain that they make the decision, they're accountable for it. They can't just over rely on the AI.
Right. And where do, decision fatigue and where does like how does that play in? Like there's going to be studies on all this and are you setting it up in this training? Is this a public service or are you also thinking down the road you might study the impact of the training on these judges?
Yeah, that's our plan. So
Okay.
we have a continued partnership with them, and we have continued study and surveys to understand how has AI changed their workflow, changed their use. Something I'd like to do is start studying the impact of AI on other countries. We're starting a partnership with the Swiss courts later this summer to develop some AI tools in the Swiss judiciary. As part of my adjunct position at NYU, I'm teaching about law and AI, and NYU has some judge training programs that we've started talking about getting involved in. No specifics yet on that, but I hope that in a year or two, I'll be able to tell you more.
Interesting. All right. Well, we will all stay tuned. All right. We have reached the rapid fire round. I got a couple questions for you, rapid fire. They're not serious, mostly. All right. You ready?
Yeah.
30 seconds or less answer. Just quick. All right. What is your favorite movie and why?
My favorite movie that I saw recently was Zootopia 2.
Okay.
And that was just
Father, you're a father.
that was just a great film. It was a beautiful animation, super funny, a great story
Yep.
about human connection and kind of social groups and mutual understanding. That's my favorite movie right now.
Okay.
Maybe that changes next week, but today it is.
Okay, cool. What do you do for fun and all that free time you have?
Oh yeah, so I play with my kids. We go scootering around the neighborhood. Actually, they make me wear a helmet so that they're comfortable wearing their helmet.
Perfect. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
I've gone through cycles of both. So in my younger years, I was definitely a night owl, but I was up at 5 this morning with I have a 2-month-old, so that was wise. And
Congratulations.
and actually that's coming much more naturally to me than I expected.
Awesome. That's awesome. What is your favorite class to teach?
This law and AI course, I love it. So actually, my probably my most my best, my most favorite teaching experience was what I did in January at Columbia.
Mm.
I taught they have these J term courses. It's legal
Yeah.
methods 2. It's for 1L. It's a 1 week course. It's 5 days. It's about 2 hours per day. And I had 100 law students, and I taught them how to use AI for legal work. And half of the class was them developing course projects where they all developed an app. And so every student in the class, they used AI to code up their own browser-based application. And the results were so amazing. Some people made like kind of fun things like an app that helps you find a restaurant nearby, what you feel like. Somebody else made an app that you could type in an address, like the address of your apartment, and it would look it up in all of the New York databases and find the different violations and crimes and kind of things about rent and tenancy and stuff that could be learned about your building. Somebody else, one of the students worked in a domestic violence clinic, and she made an app to automate the intake forms for if you were
Wow.
a potential victim of domestic violence, and it was very thoughtful about how it was designed. Somebody else made an app that helped immigrants know their rights when they were dealing with ICE. And so, just to say that was a really amazing and rewarding experience, and very fun to teach and see that learn about these projects, but also a sign of how lawyers can really kind of do more things now that we
For
have new technology.
sure, for sure. It's invigorating and yet like so distracting at times. But
Yeah,
from idea to execution is shortened exponentially. So it's
yeah.
really incredible. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a really fascinating conversation. I've appreciated getting to know you. And
Thanks.
what is one thing you want the viewers or the audience to take away from your article?
Oh yeah, so I think it's not just about law. It's not just about politics. Ideas matter. Ideas have consequences. And so when you're talking to your colleagues, when you're talking to judges, what you say about policy could really make a difference.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for joining me. Have a
Thanks
great
to
rest of
you.
your day.
Bye bye.
All right. Bye.